Let's talk about welcoming patients to presbyopia. So tonight we're going to talk about the current market landscape. How many people are wearing progressive lenses? What kind of presbyopes are we looking at? We're going to talk about how to communicate with the new presbyope. And I know if you've been in optics very long, you know that can be a very traumatic conversation when someone discovers that they have presbyopia. It's one of those first signs that you're getting a little bit older. We're going to talk about progressive lens technology. And finally, we're going to wrap up by talking about how to have success whenever you're dispensing progressives, especially to the new presbyope. So let's chat for just a few minutes here about the current market. There are 128 million presbyopes in the United States. And the beautiful thing from the optician's perspective is, even if you're not a presbyope today, someday you're going to become a presbyope. But right now, today, there's about 128 million of us. And I'm going to say us because myself, at 53, I'm a presbyope. The unfortunate thing is, in the United States, only about half of all the presbyopes out there are wearing progressive lenses. We're going to talk about a few of the other solutions that presbyopes try to use, even though it's pretty demonstrable that progressive lenses are the best solution to presbyopia. Now, of course, we all know what presbyopia is. The thing to keep in mind is a surprising number of your patients get caught unaware by presbyopia. You would think that everybody realizes that as you get older, you have an irreversible loss of your eye's ability to focus, and that's caused by aging, and that the result is you just can't see up close. I mean, everyone goes through it, and yet it's shocking to me as an optician how many times I've had that 42-year-old patient that's sitting there and going, I can't see up close anymore. And it catches them by surprise, even though everyone around them is going through the same thing at roughly the same age. And the really interesting thing is, especially over the last 10 to 20 years, our near vision has evolved. So I've been in optics for some time now. I've been an optician since 1989. And let me tell you that if you compare the 1990s and what our near vision was back then with what it is today, you're talking about a very different experience. So what I mean by that is that back in the 1990s, your near vision was pretty much defined as 16 inches. That was pretty much where people held written material. And as long as you could provide an experience where they could see really well at 16 inches and see really well far away, you were pretty much meeting their needs. Because believe it or not, even in the 1990s, most things that we looked at up close were written on paper or typed on paper. Today, that is not the case. Today, your near vision is not a static 16 inches. It actually varies anywhere from 13 inches to 25 inches. And that 13-inch one, let's just talk about that for a second. Your cell phone or your smartphone, most people hold that at an average of 13 inches from their face. Now, it might not seem like a big deal that you're holding a smartphone 3 inches closer than you tend to hold either an e-reader or a newspaper or a piece of printed material, but it is actually a big deal to your eye, because that extra 3 inches of closeness means that you have to accommodate more than you did in the past. And that's why you should not be very surprised to find that your new presbyopes are going to be a little bit younger than they've been in the past. It would not shock me at all to have a 38, 39-year-old patient sitting at my dispensing table claiming that they're having trouble seeing their smartphone. Because even though you may not notice it at 16 inches until you're in your 40s, in your late 30s, that 13 inches is probably starting to become a little bit of an issue. And then the other issue that we have is not only are we looking at things really up close, but we use laptops quite a bit. And those laptop screens are going to be around 25 inches. So if you have a solution that helps you see 13 inches, it probably, especially if it's a reader, it's not going to help you see at 25. And so that's why a progressive lens is going to be such a great solution to presbyopia, especially in modern times. We spend up to 10 hours a day on various screens. And various meaning your smartphone, the little, screens that we have in our dashboard now, our GPS, our e-readers, our laptops. And regarding smartphones, we look at them up to 96 times per day. And to be honest, just based on my own family and the people that I see around me, I bet you it's more than 96 times a day for most people. That's the average. About once every 10 minutes during your day, you are looking at your smartphone. So if you can't see well at 13 inches, you're going to notice that almost 100 times a day. And that's why if you look at the self-reported visual quality of people that have eye correction versus not having eye correction, until you get up to 35 or 37 and a half years old or thereabouts, you might get by without eye correction. But once you start turning into a presbyope, you're going to notice that if you're not wearing something to help you see, especially up close, the quality of your vision begins to decline really rapidly, especially in modern life. So when you have those patients, they may have never worn glasses before in their life. They turn 37 years old, they are going to really start noticing a decrease in the quality of their vision, especially if they're not wearing some form of correction. And hopefully, as we'll see, that form of correction will be progressive lenses. Now, like we said, there are millions and millions of presbyopes in the United States that are using other solutions to deal with presbyopia. So what are those solutions? Well, some of them are trying to wear readers. Those are single vision lenses. In the US market, over half of all lenses sold today are single vision lenses. And some of those lenses are being sold to presbyopes. So they're using a reader instead of a multifocal or a progressive lens. Now, the other really shocking one is that 13% of all of the lenses sold in the United States are still lined multifocals. And I know that when I talk about that statistic to opticians, they tend to tell me, well, yeah, that's because a lot of really old people are still wearing bifocals. But that's not necessarily the case. Each year in the United States, there are still over 400,000 pairs of +1 flat tops being made. Now let's just think about that. Almost 500,000 people in their early 40s are being put into flat top bifocals every year. And that's just not a good thing. In fact, it shows that we're lagging behind. If you look at progressive sales in Australia, and I'm not gonna pick on some, countries that we might not relate to. I'm gonna use English-speaking developed countries. 45% of of lenses being sold in Australia are progressives. 42% of lenses sold in the United Kingdom, progressives. 35% in Canada. In the United States, it's 32%. We are one of the lower of all the developed countries out there, and certainly among the English-speaking countries, we actually kind of lag when it comes to selling progressive lenses. And part of that reason and part of the opportunity is hitting patients when they first become presbyopes. That's actually one of the reasons why we lag behind, because in too many cases in the United States, when someone first enters into presbyopia, they hit upon some solution. Oftentimes it's readers, or maybe it's a line bifocal. And unfortunately, market research shows that once you figure out how you're going to deal with presbyopia, you tend to stick with that solution for the rest of your presbyopic life. And we can do better. We can do better for our patients, and we can certainly do better for the health of our practices. We don't need to have people in the United States holding their books way too far away, or wearing those readers and trying to look over top of them, or just squinting to try to see their cell phone at a far distance that's much more than 13 inches. The important thing to understand, and the thing that you have to be able to get really good at communicating with your patients, and as we're going to see, there's one type of patient that you really need to get good at talking to this about. Readers are never going to completely solve presbyopia. And the reason for that is readers only solve for one particular focal distance. We just saw not too many slides ago that near vision in modern times is not just one distance. It ranges from 13 inches to 25 inches. Now, the problem is when you're 38 years old, if you notice that, hey, I'm having trouble seeing my smartphone, yeah, you might be able to pick up a +1 reader, and it probably will solve most of your problems when it comes to looking at your smartphone, and you might even still be able to see your laptop screen through that reader. The problem, and the thing that we never think about with readers, is by the time you're 50 years old, which isn't, trust me, between 38 and 50, it seems like 12 years would be a long time. It passes by in a blink of an eye. And by the time you're 50, you're wearing a +2 ad. And a +2 ad reader will never completely satisfy you in modern life, because you're either not going to be able to see your smartphone or you're not going to be able to see the laptop screen. It's not going to cover that whole range of vision that you need for modern life. The same thing is true for bifocals. The fact is, a +1 ad bifocal for the very new presbyope, yes, you can get by with a +1 ad bifocal, but the thing that you need to communicate to your patients that are considering bifocals, that's not going to be a long-term solution. First of all, bifocals create their own problems. There's the image jump, there's that line, plus they just look terrible. But beyond all that, visually speaking, by the time, again, that you're 50 years old, there's going to be a visual gap between what you can see in the distance portion and what you can see through the near portion. And that visual gap is going to occur right where your laptop screen is. And I'm sure that you have seen people that are, they've got their head craned back, they're leaning super close to the screen. And the reason is because they're trying to get within the range of their bifocal lens. And that's just not comfortable, and it's just not smart vision. We can do better. Progressive lenses, or at least some progressive lenses, do better. They are a complete solution to presbyopia. Because why? They're going to solve the problem when you're 38 or 40 years old, and they're going to continue to solve the problem the whole way through the whole range of presbyopia. One of the things that you have to let a presbyope know, they're getting over the shock of the fact that they can't see up close. Well, I've got more bad news for you. This is a progressive condition that's going to continue to get worse for the next 30 years. And the only real visual solution that's going to work throughout that entire 30-year span is going to be a progressive lens. So again, like I said, the first solution that a new presbyope is recommended by their eye care professional is often going to be what they try to use for the rest of their presbyopic life. You start with readers, you're really going to stick with readers for a long, long time. And by the time you figure out that those readers are driving you crazy, now you're going to be a +2 ad, and it's a little bit tougher to get used to those progressive lenses. So for the rest of this presentation, we're really going to focus in on how do we have this conversation with our new presbyopes? How do we get them on the right path from the very beginning? So like I said, young presbyopes are the opportunity. Now, you may not realize this, but over the last decade or so, you haven't seen as many new presbyopes as you are going to see. And the reason is, over the last decade or so, your new presbyopes that have been wandering into your practices, they're Generation Xers like me. And there's not a lot of us. We are one of the smaller generations because there was just a dip in the number of babies that were being born when I was born. But the thing that's going to change in the next year or so, the new presbyope that you see in your office is going to be a millennial. Now, I know that, it's not like there's a hard cutoff and all of a sudden they'll be completely different, but millennials as a group, they shop differently, they have different expectations, and they use their eyes a little bit differently than Generation Xers and baby boomers do. So really one of the things we need to consider is the new presbyopes that we're going to be talking to, they're going to be millennials. They're used to using their apps and their smartphones for everything. And that is the most challenging thing to see up close when you're a presbyope. So we kind of need to adjust our approach to new presbyopes to reflect the fact that these people are now millennials and they're different people. This is the opportunity. If you want to make it so that the United States, well, let's not even talk about the United States segment of progressives. Let's talk about your office. I guarantee you there are patients that could be wearing progressive lenses in your office that are not wearing progressive lenses. There are patients that make it through your practice that they could be wearing progressives. They're just not, because either we haven't had the conversation or they walked in with a presupposition that we let them leave with. So the biggest opportunity right now is that new progressive or that new patient that's been told, hey, you're a presbyope now, you have an ad power. What am I going to do about that? That's where we can get the opportunity to trade them in and trade them up to progressive lenses. So how do we communicate with these people? And by the way, just as a funny thing, I can count on both of my hands the number of times that a patient made it to my dispensing table and the doctor had written an ad power of +1. And sometimes the doctor forgets to tell them that they're prescribing an addition. And it's always funny, oh, I see that you have an ad now, it's time to look at progressive lenses. And the patient, you realize immediately they were not told by the doctor in the exam room that they had an ad power now. And you have just told them that they are basically going to die. You know, you have presbyopia. And it's not a good feeling. In fact, it's just one of the things that represents the dispensing barrier that makes it not such a nice conversation sometimes to have with a new presbyope, because even if they have heard of progressive lenses, there can be a number of barriers and a number of assumptions that that patient is making that make it difficult as an optician to have that talk. You know, they might have heard about progressives and they're like, man, those progressives cost a lot of money. I'm not sure that's what I want. They may still be under the shock of, you know, presbyopia being a sign of aging, and I'm not old, I'm 39 years old, I'm still going to live forever, and this is one of the first signs that I'm not going to. You know, they may know people that have tried progressive lenses that weren't happy with them, and we're going to see why, because some progressive lenses do not work very well. And you know what? Let's face it, the advanced progressive lenses, they can be hard for opticians to understand sometimes. They're definitely hard to explain to a consumer. So how do you explain all the technology? And then finally, they may just be worried that, you know, hey, I've got an Aunt Louise that tried progressives and she could never get used to them, so I don't think I will either. Well, for each one of those, there is a solution, okay? And part of the solution starts with yourself. Like, for example, with price. Just assume that your patient wants the best solution and talk about it, which is a progressive lens. And you know what? If maybe down the line you discover that they really don't want to invest in a progressive, but at least give them the benefit of the doubt that they want the best solution for their vision. Get really good at talking about the fact that presbyopia, yes, it's another sign of aging. Your hair gets gray, you color it. You know, certain things happen, you take a pill for it. You can't see up close, we can solve this problem. It's just a part of aging that every single person goes through. It doesn't mean you're old, it just means you're getting wiser. That's what I tell myself every day when my knees and back and everything else hurts. I'm just getting wiser. Modern progressive technologies, if you get a good progressive, like we'll talk about here in near slides, you can really exceed their expectations, because progressives in the 1990s, yeah, they had a lot of issues that have been solved over the last 20 years. And also talk to them about, you know, hey, you have a lot of different things that you need to see within arm's length. We can fix these issues. It's called problem-focused dispensing. Talk about the problems you're going to fix instead of the technology that's fixing them. And when you talk about problems and how you can fix them, the patient's going to get very eager to try this solution. And then finally, you know what? Your patient may be confusing progressive lenses with bifocals. So be sure to let them know what a progressive lens is. You know what it is. Of course you do. You're in the industry. It is amazing the lack of knowledge the average consumer has about eyeglass lenses. Now, here's one of these first things that we're going to talk about millennial patients in general. Millennial patients really like to have one of the things, and I teach a course on perception of value. One of the things that millennials value more than other generations is experiences. And they want to feel they're very used to having products that are customized to them. Now, that doesn't mean that you always have to have a customized progressive. It just means that you have to demonstrate how the progressive that you're going to recommend to them is customized to their particular problem. So one of the best ways that you can do that as an optician, when you have a new presbyope who's likely to be a millennial now, let them show you exactly what they're having trouble with. My guess is they're going to pull out their smartphone. Okay, so let them pull out their smartphone. Let them pull out their e-reader. Maybe you should have some of these devices available at your dispensing table, because not everyone brings their e-reader to the optometrist. You know, have an e-reader there and let them demonstrate to you, this is where I'm noticing problems. And then recommend the progressive as a solution to that problem. Okay, so you're having trouble seeing your app on your smartphone. I have a solution for that problem. It's called a progressive lens. This is the particular type of progressive it is, and it's going to solve that problem for you. Pay attention to what they're describing. So I know this seems like, okay, really, Pete, but maybe you get out a piece of paper, maybe you should have a little notepad. And as you ask them to show you what they're having problems with their vision, write it down. You know what? Nothing tells people that people feel confident when they feel like you're actually paying attention to what they're saying. So write it down. You may know exactly what they're going to be saying, but go ahead and write it down. Why? Because it makes the patient feel like you're listening and like you're targeting their specific needs. In fact, nearly everyone has the same needs, but let them know that you are listening and that you can solve their particular problem. And most importantly, make a recommendation. And this is probably one of the reasons why people end up, particularly in bifocals. You know, they come in, maybe they have managed vision care, and managed vision care totally covers a bifocal, but it doesn't cover a progressive lens. And so sometimes we just let them drift through our practice and they say, well, give me what my insurance covers. Well, your insurance covers a bifocal, so you just write up a bifocal order. At least take the time to say, you know what, your insurance covers a bifocal, but it will also help pay for a progressive lens. And a progressive lens is going to be a much better solution because, and there is where you go into the discussion of what are you having trouble seeing? Well, I'm having trouble seeing my smartphone. Okay, great. Well, I can solve that with either a bifocal or progressive. Here's the problem. In a few years, you're also going to have trouble seeing your laptop screen, which you're not having a problem seeing right now. A bifocal is not going to help you see your laptop screen. A progressive lens will. So we might as well get used to it now, and your insurance will help pay for that. And I know that sounds, canned or whatever, but the fact is that 91% of progressive lens wearers, a key element in the reason they're wearing progressives is simply because their eye care professional, which is you, the optician, took the time to recommend the progressive lens. Now, this year in the United States, there's going to be 61 million people aged between 41 and 56 years old in the United States. Okay, here's just a little hint, which you already know from experience. They are not all the same people. And there are two general classifications of especially new presbyopes that are very different from each other. And that is your ametropic presbyope and your ametropic uncorrected presbyope. So let's look at each one of these. So ametropes are kind of easy. By the way, I'm an ametrope. I've been a myope nearly my whole life. And of course, whenever it became time for me to become a presbyope, even as an optician, it was traumatic. I remember the first time that I could not read something. It was a package of frozen corn cobs, and my wife had asked me to fix them. And being a husband, I'm stupid when it comes to the kitchen. I'm like, well, how do I prepare corn cobs? Well, so I'm trying to read the little print on the packaging, which basically told me to put it in boiling water. And I couldn't read it. And I'm like, this is impossibly small. No one could possibly, oh crap, I'm a presbyope. But you know what? Even though that's a little traumatic, the idea of wearing glasses, that was part of my life. I was wearing glasses since I've been 6 years old. Now, the only thing that's changing is my glasses has always allowed me to see everything. And now they're kind of letting me down when it comes to being, up close work. I've got to take them off. I don't want to do that. So How do you have that conversation with the person that's always worn glasses that is now presbyope? Well, the first thing that you let them know, because let's face it, as opticians, sometimes we are counselors. Okay, so counsel them with, you know what? Every single person on the planet becomes a presbyope. Every single person. You may have that one uncle that says they don't need reading glasses. They're in denial because every single person on the planet that has ever lived has experienced presbyopia as long as they can see. What this is going to do is gradually reduce your ability to see things within arm's reach. And I know that this is old hack for you and you already know this. Your patient probably doesn't. And then this is really the key part. Look, this is not a difficult problem to solve, but there are 3 keys to resolving this problem. The first one is we need to get your prescription right. Now, for the ametrope, this is easy because they always have understood that they need the right prescription to see clearly. The second thing that they may not know that relates to you is, now when we fit these lenses, they are going to be a little bit more technical than your previous lenses. The good news is I'm an amazing optician and I am going to fit them perfectly. But this is the reason why you shouldn't go online or you shouldn't do whatever, because there is a technical element to these lenses. They require a good fitment. The other thing is, and this is the part that they absolutely are probably not going to know, not all progressive lenses are the same. Even if you've heard about awful experiences with progressives, yes, some of them are pretty awful, but there are hundreds of different types of progressives, and I'm going to use a good one. And we are going to make this not a problem for you. Now, for an ametrope, you need to emphasize the fact that why should you use a progressive? Well, the first reason is they're going to look just like your single vision lenses. So they don't have a line, so no one's even going to know that you're a presbyope. If you've already been wearing glasses forever, you're going to wear progressives. They're going to look just like your single vision lenses. You're going to be able to see just the same way that you've always seen, and life's going to be good. You do not want to wear bifocals, and you don't want to take them on and off because the myope is going to, heck, myself, until for the week it took me to get a pair of progressives the first time, I just took my glasses off and I could still read because I was a myope. -1, take my glasses off, hey, everything's perfect again. And it's really tempting for the new presbyope to say, well, I'll just take my glasses off if I'm a myope. Yeah, that's not going to work for very long, okay? And you're still going to have blurry vision up really close. So let's not do that. Let's not wear bifocals because you don't want to get used to having a line and you don't want a lens that looks different than what you've been wearing. Okay, no need to advertise that we're getting a little older. And you're going to have, with the right progressive, we can give you an experience that's very similar to what you've had with your glasses so far in life. So again, emphasize that a progressive lens is a complete solution. It's going to solve every issue you're having today. And more importantly, over the next 30 years, it's going to solve all your issues as well. Which brings us to the other type of patient. So I am sure maybe you yourself are an emetrope. And if you're an emetrope and you don't need any kind of correction, let me just say that in market research, we have noticed that your psychological self-image of yourself is that you are superior to everyone that wears glasses and contacts. And that's okay. You view yourself, though, as I don't need glasses. I know people that need glasses, but I have strong eyes like the bull. I have strong eyes. I don't wear glasses. Now, here's the problem. You've never worn glasses. You've self-identified. Part of your persona is, I don't need glasses. Well, now you become a presbyope. And the doctor may tell you, hey, you probably should wear glasses all the time so that you can see up close. That's really tough, psychologically speaking. So how do you have that conversation? Well, but I don't wear glasses. Because usually what happens with an emetrope is they try to get away with readers. And the funny thing is, psychologically speaking, emetropes do not consider readers to be glasses. This one always makes me just chuckle when I see it in market research. And you know this because they don't call them readers, they call them cheaters. And if you really press them, they'll say, well, these aren't glasses, these are just cheaters that I use to see up close. So for the emetrope, in the dispensary, you need to, again, emphasize, look, every single person in the world experiences presbyopia. So if you thought you could get away for life with never wearing something in front of your eyes, guess what? Just nature is against you. The thing is, you still have excellent vision. So those super strong eyes that you say you have, they're still super strong. You don't need any help to see far away. But presbyopia is going to gradually reduce your ability to see things that are close up, and it's going to get worse, okay? So the three keys, again, and we were already over them, you need to have the right, because guess what? A lot of emmetropes actually have a tiny little bit of prescription. It's going to help you see a little bit better in the distance, probably, okay, the right RX. The right fit is going to be super important, and the right progressive will be invisible. It's going to be like your experience of not having to wear glasses. But the keys are to have the right doctor, the right optician, and the right lens. And I'm going to help you do that. Now, what you need to empathize, because your enemy with the emmetrope is readers. Progressives are a complete solution. Presbyopia is not going to stop. It's going to get worse. And yes, the little +1 reader that you're going to run the Walgreens and get may fix your issues today, but it's going to create problems in the future. And by the way, cheaters have a lot of shortcomings. You think you're going to go out and buy a pair of cheaters. You're going to end up buying 5 or 6 pairs. Because remember what we said about you check your smartphone 96 times a day. Every single time you check your smartphone, it's the hardest thing to see up close. You're going to have to drag your cheaters out 96 times a day. And guess what? You're going to be in the kitchen and you left your cheaters by your computer. You're going to be at work and you left them at home. You're going to be at home and you left them at work. So you're going to have them all over the place. And guess what? You might not psychologically think they're glasses. They're still glasses, and most readers look dorky. We can get you some really cool looking regular glasses that you're going to wear. They're going to look awesome, and you'll never have to take them off, and you'll look great. Okay, we just did a thing with Major League Baseball where the big hurt, who has always had perfect vision, Frank Thomas, now he's wearing glasses all the time, and he's like, guess what? These progressive lenses, they work a heck of a lot better than the readers I was trying to use in the past. Just get him over it. Now let's talk a little bit about progressive lens technology. Believe it or not, and you know what, I'm going to say believe it or not, because I run into a lot of opticians and optometrists that believe that all progressive lenses are the same. They are not. The design of a progressive plays a ridiculously crucial role in restoring near vision for presbyopes. And if you use a poor progressive design, you can do the best fitting in the world. They're still not going to have a good experience. Your doctor can write the best prescription in the world. Still not going to be a good experience. And here's the problem. Not only do we suffer from sometimes professionals think that all progressives are the same, most of your patients believe that all progressive lenses are the same. They are not aware that there are different progressive lenses. When we ask them in market research, how many different progressive lenses do you think there are? 5 out of 6 immediately respond 1. Now, I want you to think about that for a second, because a lot of progressives cause a lot of bad side effects. They decrease your sharpness at near. Yes, they help you see up close, but if they have high order aberrations, you can't see up close really sharply in dim light. And a lot of them make it difficult to go from distance to near and back again. Almost all of them produce a swimmy feeling, and a lot of them, even Generation Xers, oh, I have trouble finding the right spot for all the trillions of screens I've got to look at. Now, if you dispense a progressive lens that causes those problems, here's my question. Who are they going to blame? Well, since all consumers basically feel there's only one progressive lens, guess who they blame whenever they have problems with progressives? They either blame the doctor, and we have heard this over and over and over again in market research. Why do you see well in a progressive lens? Well, if the doctor twirls the knobs the right way and writes down the right numbers, I'm going to see well. The other problem, think about it. When someone comes back to your practice and they're having trouble seeing through a progressive lens, do they come back and say, hey, I think I need a different type of progressive lens. This one's not working very well. No. What did they ask for? I need a recheck. Why? because my opinion is the doctor screwed up. Either that or you screwed up because you didn't make my glasses right and I'm having problems. Okay? So progressives are not the same. Conversely, you give them a good progressive that makes them see perfectly. Guess who they blame for their amazingly awesome vision? That's right, you and the doctor. So if you use the right progressive lens, they're going to be happy. And look, I would love it if consumers really cared who Essilor is. They don't care who Essilor is. They want to see well. And if they see well, they're not going to credit Essilor for that. They're going to credit you. So take credit for good products and give your patient the right progressive. What do I mean by the right progressive? The number one expectation, and we have asked hundreds and thousands of progressive wearers, what's the number one thing you want from your progressive lens? I want to be able to see up close sharply again. That's the number one thing because that's what I've lost. And all progressive lenses help you see up close. The problem is most progressive lenses have higher order aberrations. What's a higher order aberration? It's a tiny little disturbance, like what you see on the lake on the bottom left. And that tiny little disturbance, it doesn't make things completely blurry, but it makes them less sharp. And what happens is when you go to read a menu in a dimly lit restaurant, yeah, maybe you can read up close with your progressive when you have bright light, but in dim light, kind of a little bit tough. So you get out your smartphone and you turn on the flashlight, which makes you feel like an ancient crypt keeper. Okay, the right progressive lens doesn't have higher order aberrations. You can see sharply, just like you did when you were 25 years old. Now, what do I mean by higher order aberrations? These are all wavefront images, and all of these lenses are digitally surfaced progressive lenses. But some lenses have less higher order aberrations in them than others. And when your pupil gets bigger, like it does in dim light, that's when you notice higher order aberrations. Now, green is good on a wavefront image, and every single one of these wavefronts was taken from the optical center, so 4 millimeters below the fitting cross, right smack in the middle of the progression. Green is good. On that perfectly clear image that was perfectly crisp with the calm lake, that lake would have a completely green wavefront because everything is happening like it should. And if you look at a Verilux lens, you're going to see that very little higher order aberration. If you look at some other lenses like the one on the right, I love testing against that lens because all I have to do is give you a pill bottle, put you in dim lighting and ask you to read it. And you will immediately notice that it's difficult to read through that progressive lens and really through the 4 progressives to the right. Through a Verilux lens with Wave 2 technology, you can see it perfectly clear, just like you did when you were 25. You shouldn't have to get your flashlight app out after you spent $400 on a progressive lens. So use a progressive lens that doesn't require you to do that, and your patient will be happy. Now, smooth transitions. Okay, I'm going to bring up something that's illegal and you shouldn't do, but people do it. You're driving home from work. You get a text message from someone at home. Now, I know you're supposed to pull your car over to a complete stop, put it in park, and read your text messages. But let's face it, most people are going to glance down at their cell phone. When you glance down at your cell phone, it's going to take you a second or two to be able to see it. And the reason is because think about it. Where are you holding your cell phone when you're driving? You're going to hold it down and to your right. Well, when you look down and to your right eye is looking down and temporally through the design at the same time that your left eye is trying to look down and to the nasal side of the design. Guess what? In nearly every progressive ever made, those 2 parts of the design do not provide the exact same image. That's what this chart shows. If you have a design that's not well balanced, when you look down and to the right, what the chart is showing is in the middle, your eyes see exactly the same thing. In the yellow areas, your eyes see slightly different things, but your brain can still make them form a unified image. But when you get to the red and the pink areas, the image is so different that your brain has to turn one of your eyes off. It's called suppression. With a design that's designed with something like synchronized technology, where every corresponding point in the lens is matched up to give you the same image. You can dispense a progressive that when you look down and to the right at that cell phone, you immediately can see that cell phone. And the reason is because the images are similar enough that your brain can maintain binocular vision. And when you're trying to drive a car and read a cell phone, Maintaining binocular vision is a good thing because it means that you can look very quickly back in the distance. Yes, the text told you you needed to get milk on the way home from work. Now, just to use a legal example of this, if you're watching Netflix and you're 42 years old and you get a text, you should be able to glance down, look at your text, and glance right back at the show you're watching. It shouldn't take you 3 seconds to figure out how to read what you're trying to read on your smartphone. You shouldn't have to pause Netflix. The right progressive will allow you not to have to do that. Swim. Every single progressive lens on the planet, except for one, causes considerable amounts of swim. Why? Because progressive lenses have more plus power in the bottom than in the top. Plus power causes magnification. So all progressive lenses have more magnification in the bottom than in the top, and it creates the effect that you're seeing on the screen right now. There is one progressive lens that has something called nanoptics in it, and it manages the magnification, so there is no swim. Stairs are a heck of a lot easier to climb when they're not moving around due to magnification. So recommend and dispense a progressive that doesn't cause swim, and you will have a much happier presbyope. And they will credit you for their excellent vision and their ability to run up the stairs without grabbing the handrail. And then finally, the biggest complaint about progressive lens among Generation Xers, and I suspect it will be even greater among millennials, man, I constantly have to move my head around to find the right spot to see every single screen that is in front of me. And the solution to that is something called Extend technology. It's found in only one design out there. And what Extend technology does is it greatly increases the volume of vision that you're going to get through your progressive lens. If you look at most premium progressive lenses, the result is the image on the left. So the blue cloud that you're seeing represents the volume of area that a modern progressive lens wearer needs to be able to focus within to survive. And the little golden sliver represents the volume of vision that most progressives provide to you. And what you're going to notice is that sliver is pretty darn small. That's why most progressive lens wearers, to see every screen that they have to see, they have to swing their head all over the place looking for just the right area. And that's just not very nice. It's not what you had to do when you were 25 years old wearing single vision lenses. The lens on the right has 3 to 5 times more volume of vision. And what people notice in clinical studies when they wear a Varilux X design lens, hey, I don't have to move my head very often and I can see everything I need to see. It's a very different experience. And when your patient has that experience and they don't have to move their head and they just have natural vision, they're not going to blame the lens manufacturer. They're going to say, wow, my optician and my optometrist, they're amazing. I'm going to tell all my friends and relatives they need to go to this doctor's office because they can solve your visual problems. 90% of a modern person's visual activities are within arm's reach. And yet half of all modern premium progressive lens wearers are not completely happy with their vision within arm's reach. Give them a lens that makes them happy within arm's reach, and 90% of their day, they will notice the superiority of their vision. The design of a progressive lens does matter. So you give them the right progressive lens, you're going to give them sharp vision even in that restaurant in dim light. You're going to make it easier to either see their cell phone when they're watching Netflix or read a text message when they're driving. You're going to allow them to run up the stairs because the stairs aren't moving around. And you're going to give them enough volume of vision to where they don't have to constantly hunt for the right spot. You are going to get rid of most of the issues that progressive lenses have created for decades if you use the right progressive lens. And when that patient is ridiculously happy, it will translate into them being happy with you and referring people to you. Now, just to wrap up in the last few minutes here, it doesn't matter how great of a progressive lens you recommend if you don't have the third part of the triangle. Remember those 3 things? You got to have the right prescription, the right lens design. Hey, you got to do your job as an optician. And that means you have to fit those lenses where they need to be. The number one reason, and I've been doing this for 32 years now, I've been on thousands of troubleshooting adventures. I'm sad to say, as an optician, 85% of the time, even more than 85% of the time, when a progressive lens doesn't work, and I don't care what progressive it is, it's usually due to a poor fit. And it just pains my heart to say that as an optician, but you got to put the fitting cross in the right spot. And that right spot is right in front of the pupil. Okay. Now, when you are figuring out your fitting height, most opticians know that, for most progressive lenses, you have to have 17 millimeters, at the very minimum, 14 millimeters. What a lot of opticians don't realize is you also have a minimum requirement for between the center of the pupil and the top of the frame, and that's 10 millimeters. Studies have shown that if you reduce that distance to make it less than 10 millimeters, you're really going to negatively affect the visual experience that the patient has, because they're not going to have sufficient distance vision. Now, the other thing, you need to take a monocular PD and a monocular fitting height, because guess what? Most of you know that people don't have, even PDs most of the time. You'd be surprised at how many people don't have even fitting heights as well. So take that monocular fitting height and take a monocular PD. And you're like, Pete, of course I take a monocular PD. Really? Because if I go over, one of the largest labs in the country is right across from my office. I can go over there today, pick 10 progressive orders at random, and 3 out of 10 of those orders will have monocular PDs on them. Don't be that optician. Take a monocular PD. It will greatly help your patient have a better experience with their progressive lens. Pre-adjust the frame. Now, I get that, hey, maybe you're in a program where you don't even dispense the frame that's on your board, like it comes from the laboratory or something. I don't care. Adjust that frame before you take a fit, even if it's not the frame that the patient's eventually going to get. When that frame comes in, adjust it too. And how should you adjust it? To be honest, you should be trying to get about 8 degrees of panoscopic tilt. You should be shooting for around 7 degrees of wrap. And you should try to fit that frame as close to the eye as possible, hopefully around 12 millimeters. When you do that, you're going to position those lenses to work their very, very best. And you're not going to need to take fit measurements, because guess what? 8 degrees, 7 degrees, and 12 millimeters is pretty much what most progressive lens designers are assuming when they design a progressive lens. The only time you really need to take fit measurements is if you cannot get the lens to have 8 degrees of panos, 7 degrees of wrap, or fit at 12 millimeters of vertex. In that case, you need to take the actual measurement that the lens is fitting at, and you need to tell the designer, hey, I'm ordering a fit lens, and I'm telling you it doesn't fit the way you think. Here's how it actually fits. But as long as you can get 8 degrees, 7 degrees, and 12 millimeters, you're good to go, and the patient's going to be happy. When you take that PD, it's funny, but we called a PD stick a ruler. In fact, I've got one right here. Do you know what the one thing you should never do with a PD ruler is? Take a PD. You should at least be using a pupillometer, for a reason that we're going to see on the next slide here. Now, you may have a digital device like a tablet or something like that. Hey, those work great too. But at the very minimum, use a pupillometer and make sure that your pupillometer is calibrated. Make sure that it's accurate. If you don't know how to do that, ask your lens rep the next time they're in. Use a pupillometer for the PD, and if you're going to use a ruler at all, use it for the fitting height and measure both eyes. Now, why shouldn't you use a PD stick to take a PD? Okay, the reason is because the center of the pupil is not where you need to put the fitting cross. You need to put the fitting cross in front of the visual axis of the patient. In other words, there is a particular light ray that is going to go through the pupil. It's going to go to the macula, and it is not going to go through the very geometric center of the pupil in most people. It's going to go through the corneal apex. Okay, now conveniently, the corneal apex is what creates a reflection when you shine light at it, and a pupillometer works by shining the light at the cornea. The apex creates a reflection. And when you put that little bar right on top of that reflection, you're taking into account the kappa angle. We're not going to go into what the kappa angle is. Let's just say you are creating a situation where your patient will have the best vision. The other problem is if you live in a state like Florida where patients have to be dilated, when the pupil dilates, it does not dilate symmetrically. So now the center of the pupil is really going to be off. So again, always use a pupillometer at the very least and use that corneal reflection to take a monocular PD. When you take your fitting height, I mentioned that poor fitting is the reason that 85% of progressives non-adapt in the United States. Fitting too low is the #1 fitting error. If you habitually fit lenses too low on purpose, stop doing that. If you use a design that requires you to do that, stop using that design. A progressive should fit right in the center of the pupil when it comes to the height. Now, the other reasons that you might accidentally measure too low is make sure you are measuring from the pupil center to the deepest part of the lens. Okay, that may not be directly below the eye. And finally, xyl frames, plastic frames are really popular today. Take into account the fact that you need to add a millimeter when you're taking a height in a xyl frame because the bevel of the lens is extending down into that xyl frame by about a millimeter. When you do all this, you use a good progressive, you verify the RX and you check that glass whenever it comes back from the laboratory and you demonstrate to the patient how well it works, you are going to have yourself a happy patient and they are going to consider you an optical god and life will be great.